packet attack, spoof the headers all you want, nobody's going to find out who did it, and in one packet you dial a shell. These UDP packets are tunneled left, right, and center through stun and all those type of things. So chances are they'll make their way through where the phone is. This is, I think, a highly wormable situation. Somebody is talking on the phone. Okay. Point it to 176, and let me pull this window a little to the side to see if something happens there. Okay. I do this, and over here the debugger does something. What's this? Let's take a look. We don't get EIP is equal to 41414141 or anything. No such luck here. Currently the debugger is within some exception handling routine, and there it has actually, it's actually created an exception. The handler hasn't kicked in yet. So let's try to find out where the handler is. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give this command !exchain to just see the chain of handlers. I see 3 custom exception handlers registered. The SIP-XTAPI check for handler leaks, check for handle leaks, part 1, check for handle leaks 2, check for handle leaks 3. And the last exception handler registered in this is the default Visual C++ runtime MSVCRT except handler. That's the default ACH handler. The ACH handler is basically what kicks up that dialog box. Your program has thrown up, do you want to send all details and all your IDs to Microsoft, or do you want to cancel it, or do you want to debug it? That's the code that kicks up this dialog box. We're going to overwrite the address of one of these registered exception handlers. So instead of the dialog box kicking up, we'll get control to our code. Now, all these ACH addresses are also on the stack. Let's just take a quick look and see where they're on the stack. Here it shows us the first ACH is at 011 FFBD0. For those of you who know how Windows ACHs work, is you have a linked list of ACH records. The topmost record pointing to the next one pointing to the third one, the third one pointing to the nth one, and the last record's pointer is FFFFFFF, which doesn't point anywhere. Now, below this linked list pointer, there's 4 bytes used for pointing to the next record, and the next 4 bytes contain an address to the exception handler code. Let me just show you a quick diagram to put this in perspective. So this is what is happening. You have some function which is pretty much going to be hosed when you do the overwrite. For that functions frame, you have the exception handler record. The top part of the yellow record on the top points to the next ACH in the chain, which is the bottom one. After the pointer, you have an address to the custom registered exception handler. Now, this address is always a part of the same function's frame, or interspersed between the frames for all practical purposes. Therefore, if you overwrite local variables in this function and keep overwriting all the way down into the stack frame, you may definitely be able to overwrite EIP, but if you go further, you'll also end up overwriting the address of the exception handler. Then, when an exception kicks in, and it will certainly kick in because what you've done creates that exception itself, the operating system will take control. In the Unix case, what happens when process throws an exception? OS kicks in, the code in the exception handler of the OS says dump all the memory files to a core file. When this kicks in, the OS will say, okay, let me look what ACHs are registered, look at the ACH, and then jump to it. Now, if we have overwritten that address, we will get control after the OS passes it back to the exception handler. So that's the long and short theory of overwriting ACH. All right. So the luxury of overwriting ACH is, A, exploits are definitely more reliable. B, you get a longer buffer to play with. Okay. So now, let me just look at the stack and find out where this address, what our stack looks like for this SIP phone. So let's start dumping values from the stack pointer, ESP, and oops, okay, yeah, there we go. Yeah, dump out the addresses, the values from the stack. Notice over here we encounter our own buffer or a copy of it lying on the stack. So now we know where we are. We are at FFFF84. Another DDS command shows you more of the stack. Another DDS command shows you even further. Well, here is where the structured exception handler's first record is at 011 FFBD0. Those 4 bytes point to the next ACH record, which is at FFDE0. And the 4 bytes after that pointer point to this exception handler code at address 100AA406. Let us see if this address kicks in to test our theory. This address is found at location 11FFBD4 on the stack, 256 bytes below where our buffer begins on the stack. Therefore, to overwrite this address, we got to make our buffer at least 260 bytes, and we'll be able to overwrite the address of this exception handler. But first, let's see if this exception handler kicks in. So I'm going to set a breakpoint, 100AA406. So the breakpoint is set. And now, let me just trace through this program. I just say G. When I say G, sure enough, it says breakpoint hit. We were at that overflow situation. It trapped to the OS. The OS came back and bounced to your structured exception handler, which we which you have put a breakpoint on, and sure enough, it's at that address. So now, we can create an exploit which ends up overwriting the ACH and then do the whole jump back to register thing. So let me show you a proof of concept of that, and right after that I'll show you how integrating it within Metasploit framework works. Okay, so let me quit this and restart the SIP phone for yet another go. Programs, SIP phone. Startup. There, started. Attach it. Attach it to the debugger. SIPX easy phone. Go. Okay, let me now walk you through the second proof of concept exploit. So here's a second proof of concept exploit, which actually let me skip this one and show you the third one itself. Okay, so here's a almost ready to roll proof of concept exploit. What we have to do is we have to create some jump code in addition to our shell code to get to this interrupt 3 region. What happens in the case of this SIP exploit is that the register does not point to the beginning of our buffer, it points to the very end. So from the very end, we have to actually jump back by some bytes. Rather, it actually points to the very end, but interrupting it is 4 bytes which we have to jump over, and then we append the shell code. So that's what these jump bytes are. Don't worry about that. Here we picked out a value for overwriting EIP as 77F9 to what is that? To A9B. This value is where a jump ESP instruction or a jump EBX instruction is found in ntdll.dll. What happens in this SIP overflow is that EBX points to the trailing end of this buffer, and we need a jump EBX instruction to successfully step through to our shellcode. We again use MSF PE scan, look through one of the one of the Windows DLLs, and in NTDLL we find this offset containing a jump EBX instruction. The length to our buffer has to be 256 bytes. We create a padding of 252 bytes. At the end of it, we put this 4-byte jump code. That is because EBX is going to be pointing to those 4 bytes. Then we put our 4-byte overwritten EIP address. The jump code has to skip over that. And then at the end of our EIP address, we put our shell code. So the construction of the buffer is like this. You have your padding of 252 A's. Then you add the jump code, you pack the EIP, you put a little knob sled, and then you have your shell code at the end. Put it into this UDP buffer and send it along its way. So let's do that. I'll run it as sipex3.pl, and notice what happens in the debugger. Sure enough, the debugger throws an exception. And now let us step through this exception. We should now be jumping to the jump EBX instruction. Let us see where EBX is pointing to first. EBX is pointing to, currently it's not pointing anywhere, but once that overflow kicks in, it will point to the jump code, and then it will go to interrupt 3. Okay, so let me just do a G. There we are. Now our EIP is pointing to interrupt 3. If we say db EIP, you notice that EIP is already ready at the gates of our shellcode. So if we put our shellcode over here, we win. All right. Of course, to understand all this, you require to read through some papers describing SEH overrides, or play around with it enough, I guess. All right. Now, we know that we can successfully come to interrupt 3. The rest, let Metasploit take care of this. So I'm just going to run the program without the debugger and now show you the Metasploit plugin that I've coded up for this. It's pretty much the same as the Perl code, just cut and paste into the exploit.